2023 had a lot of duds for reading, in my opinion, and this list is just going to be the worst ones. I'm going to love filming this video because I love to be a hater, but this is my own opinion. No offense to anyone. I'm not trying to insult anyone. I'm not saying your opinion's wrong if you love these books. I'm not saying that the books are necessarily bad. They may just not be to my taste. Everyone can read what they want to read and enjoy what they want to read, but that's not going to stop me from saying my piece. A lot of these books I'm not going to still have the physical copy of, or I read them on Kindle and I deleted them because I'm the type of person to kick books out of my life straight away if I don't want them in my collection. I don't build up a massive selection, I get gone. There are two I still have the physical copy of, and number 10 is one of them, and that is 13 Stories by Jonathan Sims. This is a collection of short stories that are horror, and a moment for the cover because this is stunning. I heard about this, I don't remember if Jordaline recommended it or if I just saw it on her channel of her like explaining it and hauling it, but I remember thinking it sounds really good. So this is basically, there's this penthouse of apartments and the man who owns it, the billionaire, sends invitations to this party to all the different people that live in the buildings, and each short story is each individual person's story. But we are aware that at this party, the host, the billionaire who sent the invitations, ends up dead. So it's all leading up to the party and what happened. This started off really good. It was really gripping, the stories were fun, and then somewhere a little way in, like maybe halfway in, it just completely fell flat. It lost its way. And I don't remember the ending with the reveal of what actually happened. If there was one, I don't remember. I just remember feeling very unsatisfied with it. So this wasn't awful, but it was very disappointing for a book that started off so strong. The 9th book on this list is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I do not still own this book. I was very tempted to keep it just because I had the stunning Fairy Loot cover, but I'm not keeping beautiful books if I don't like the inside. So this one is about Signa Farrow, and through her life, all of her people around her have been gradually dying. So she is left to just the family called the Hawthorns, who are her only remaining guardians. And her mother's spirit, because her mother's dead, comes to her and claims she's been poisoned. So Signa has to figure out who poisoned her mother to be able to protect the only people she's got left. And in doing this, she gets the help of death. And that premise sounds amazing. I was so excited to read this one, but I just couldn't get into it. It fell very flat for me. It wasn't very interesting. I found it quite dull, and from that premise alone, this story should in no way be dragging. It should be, you know, have a lot of momentum in it, because you're tracking down a killer using death as your assistant. That should be gripping, but sadly it was just a very big letdown. I have seen other people love this book and really recommend it, so I think this one is very much, it's just not to my personal taste. So I would still give it a go if you haven't read it yet, because it still might be for you. So the 8th book on this list is Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright. This is a very short book. It's quite a horrific, it covers a lot of horrific subject matter. It follows Andrew Compton, who is a homosexual serial killer who has just broken free from prison. He's escaped from his confinement, and he is based off of Dennis Nielsen, another famous serial killer. And then he meets Jay Byrne, who is based off of Jeffrey Dahmer, another very famous serial killer. And Jay Byrne is another serial killer who is also a cannibal. And they initially plan to victimize each other, but once they discover their aligning interests, they decide to team up and have a sexual relationship while also fulfilling their murderous fantasies at the same time. And then it also follows another set of characters that deal with, they've broken up after the one character discovers he has HIV. He pushes everyone in his circle around him away. And then it also deals with the other character being kicked out of his home for being homosexual. His parents reject him and kick him out. So this book covers a lot of very important subject matter, I believe. You know, the struggles of finding where you belong, having acceptance for just being who you are. It opens up the realness of dealing with HIV, and yeah. Poppy Z. Bright actually describes this book as a necrophilic, cannibalistic serial killer love story that explores the seamy politics of victimhood and disease, which I think is a very beautiful way to describe this book. Unfortunately, it didn't really pack a punch. It's been quite a long time since I've read this, so I don't remember a lot of the details, but I think it suffered from being so short. I think it needed fleshing out, because there's a lot of subject to cover and a lot of story to cover in those pages, and I don't think it was gone into enough depth for it to really hit home. I think it was it wasn't fast paced, because I remember it dragging, which once again it shouldn't do in such short pages, but it just didn't really do what I think it was trying to do, for me at least. But this is another one with also a very beautiful cover that I struggled to get rid of. The seventh book on this list I'm not going to go into in any detail really and explain what it's about, because it is the fourth in a series, and that is Glow by Raven Kennedy. This one was mainly a disappointment because I loved the first three in the series, beginning with Guild and then I think Gleam, and there's another one but I don't remember what it's called. And then Glow seemed to really just stilt the momentum that had been going through in the first three books. I found myself really bored with Glow. It just wasn't doing the same things. And I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I think a big part of that is because a main character that was a driving force in the story was no longer in the story. So it felt like, what are we trying to achieve? Like, we've reached the end. And so it was dragging a lot because there was no direction to the story, in my opinion. The sixth book on this list is the other book that I still have the physical copy of, and that is Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. This is about Laurel, who, when she's young, her sister Ellie goes missing, and she's trying to find out what has happened to her and where she's gone, if she's still alive, if she's okay. And she meets this man, And then when she's introduced to his daughter, she is the spitting image of her missing sister Ellie. So it's delving into what happened with Ellie. Is this man connected? Who is this girl? Who's his daughter? Is she connected to Ellie? Is she Ellie? You know, all this other stuff. I wouldn't say this is necessarily a bad book. I think for me, because I watch a lot of true crime and I read a lot of thrillers, this just didn't surprise me in any way. Every kind of reveal I had already figured out, and a lot of it I figured out way before it was revealed. So I don't know if that's a fault of mine for being really into the genre, or if it was just written so blatantly that you could just see exactly where the story was going. And with my thrillers, I like to be surprised, because that's the joy of thrillers, just being like jaw dropped at the reveals, and making the author making you feel like they're way more intelligent in a way, because they've managed to outsmart you and you haven't been able to figure out what's going on. But unfortunately with this one, I just knew it all. Nothing was shocking, nothing was a big reveal, and it just felt very lackluster to me. On to number 5, and we're reaching the stage of the list where I start to list books that are deemed very in high esteem and on a lot of people's favorite books. So warning if you're about to be offended by my next list of books. But number 5 is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I was really expecting to love this one, not just because of the hype, but because I love Greek mythology. I love learning about all the heroes, and this is about Patroclus's and Achilles' story. But I just found it really boring. I didn't find that much really happened, and it's not a spoiler, but it's like a tragic love story, which isn't really my thing. I like to have my love stories be happy and have a happy ending, which I know isn't the reality of a lot of Greek mythology. There's a lot of hard-hitting stuff, but for me, even before the tragic ending, it just fell flat for me. It wasn't very interesting. And I thought even if I didn't care for the story, I would find the world interesting, because I love Greek mythology. But just didn't do it for me, I'm afraid. Once again, it's been a long time since I've read this one, so I don't remember a lot of the details, but I remember just being really disappointed. At number 4 is a book I read for Katie Colson's Patreon book club pick, and that was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. Now, this book is one I convinced myself I liked a lot more than I actually did after I finished reading it, which I love to do. I did the same with Ninth House. I convinced myself I liked it because I wanted to like it, because it was such a popular book. And then I went and reread it and I was like, no, I hate this. This is similar to what happened with this book, even though I didn't reread it. I just had time to think of it and I was like, not much happened. So this is about Miri, and her wife Leah is missing at sea for years. I don't remember how long, I think it might be like 6 years, but don't quote me on that. And then the story follows 2 timelines. One is of Leah being back with Miri and something's not quite right with her. And then the other one follows Leah in her submarine under the sea and what actually happened. Except that you don't actually see what happens. Nothing is actually revealed. I expected this to have a lot of sea horror, but there is barely anything. I think the ship just goes dark and you see like a shape. That's not going to do it for me. I want actual horror. And even the other storyline where something's happening to her, I didn't find that horrific. And because we have no time spent with these two wives and their connection, and we don't see them much as a happy loving couple, I don't really feel much at the thought that Miri is losing her wife. I'm not connected to their love. So I feel like if I felt stronger and we got to know the characters a bit more, I would feel Miri's gradual losing of her wife a lot more. But the way it's written, it just doesn't really create much impact. Into the top 3. So number 3, I think, has very mixed reviews. I think a lot of people agree of it being one of the worst and most disappointing of the year, and other people really liked it, and that is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This was very disappointing for me. I loved the cover, I liked the title, which the title's misleading. We ain't selling any haunted houses, we're not really going into that. The general premise is about Louise and her brother Mark, who have to go and sell this house. So it is about selling a house, but it barely goes into that. The Louise and Mark themselves were very unlikable. I wasn't rooting for them. They can be dragged away by whatever, I don't care. And then some way through the book, evil puppet is brought into play. Why, Grady? Why? We don't need a puppet. And at that point, I just felt like the book was just... I don't mind a book that it has fun and doesn't take itself seriously, but it just felt a bit too far. It felt like, how am I meant to be invested in this story if we're just taking the piss? But yeah, very disappointed with that one. On to the top 2, and these are the 2 that I think are gonna offend most people, because these 2 books are a lot of people's favourite books of all time or of this year, and I just didn't feel the same. So number 2 is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I don't get what the hype is. I really don't. I wanted to love it because the cover is beautiful. I had the stunning Fairy Loot edition, so I was desperate to keep it. Spoiler, I didn't keep it. I sent it to my friend Haley, who wanted it. But this book is about Dracula's first bride, Constantina, and that sounds like a great time because I am someone who is obsessed with vampires. I love vampire media, so I thought this would be really up my street. And it's a very short book, so I thought it'd be really fast paced. Turns out no. I don't feel like there was much of an actual story in there, and it made me very uncomfortable because the relationships were very incesty in the way they would speak to each other and interact, and I just, no. I wasn't invested in any of the characters. I didn't care for whatever the story was, which in my opinion there wasn't much of a story, and it just made me very uncomfortable. It was not, I will give that it did have very beautiful writing, but I don't really see what other people are seeing. So that brings us to my worst book of the year, and apologies to my friend Jessie in advance because she knows it's coming. But that is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Another one that I just don't get it. This is about Iris and Roman, who are both journalists, and they have their rivals in their journalist company, and they're trying to fight to be the one that's promoted, and they have these typewriters that when they send the letter through under the door or something, it ends up in the other person's bedroom. So they're writing letters to each other, and Roman knows that it is Iris, but Iris doesn't know that it's Roman. And it's about them connecting through the letters, and then they go off to be war correspondents, and she wants to find out what's happened. Her brother's gone off to war and she wants to find out what's happened to him. But no, this book, it starts off fine. Nothing to write home about. It's fine. I thought it would get better. I was mistaken. It got worse. I have quite a few issues with this book. One, the little pockets of magic are not explained. Why is there magic in this world? What magic is there in this world? I don't get it. Why is there just these typewriters? How does the magic of how the letters get to each other's rooms work? I understand that it's because they're those specific typewriters, but how does it work? It's not really ever explained. And a big issue I have with this is the romance. This is described as enemies to lovers. Where? Enemies to lovers is my favourite trope, but I like my enemies to lovers to have enemies. They're not enemies. They're two characters that have a rivalry, but they don't really dislike each other that much. It's one of those where they pretend to dislike each other, but they actually like each other, and that's not enemies. And I find that they warm up to each other, even though they were never cold, very quick. That's another thing. I like a slow burn. This was in no way. So a big part of, I DNF'd this at 85% because I was so annoyed. Because, spoiler for the romance section, but he pretends, he like tries to propose after they've kissed once, and then they actually get married after they kiss, like, I think it's twice or 3 times. And I DNF'd at the wedding. I was like, no, you've lost me. Why are we getting married after we've kissed like twice? No. I appreciate in the context of the world, they are in a war, and you know, you've got to seize every moment. But no, you do not know each other that well. You have not worked through your actual romantic relationship and see if you are actually compatible with each other. You've kissed twice. You haven't even slept together. Which I appreciate not everyone does before they get married, no disrespect, but you at least, if you do live that kind of way, you get to know the person way more first. You see if you are compatible before you get married. Because in this world, they're not doing like an arranged marriage. He is actually trying to escape his arranged marriage. So that just really didn't work for me, and I got so annoyed that I couldn't finish the book. I was like, no, I'm not here for this wedding. So that was my worst books of the year. I'm hoping I didn't offend anyone. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong. And also let me know what your worst books were in the comments.